Today I wanted to talk about how CBK is keeping you broke. I like to remind people all the time that CBK is not your friend. CBK never makes any decision for the benefit of Kenyans because CBK is not controlled from Nairobi. CBK is controlled from London and Washington. Perhaps the best example is the fact that CBK has resisted instructions from two presidents to raise the threshold at which banking transfers can be made without interruption. Today, if you go to a bank and you're trying to transfer 1 million shillings and above, the bank will ask you a series of questions, very intrusive and very disrespectful questions. They'll ask you, where did you get this money? Why are you taking it? And so on and so forth. And there's an inbuilt delay in the transfer. The official reason for this is anti-fraud and anti-terror legislation. That's what they claim. This has the effect of disrupting business because that inbuilt delay is an additional hurdle that many businesses have to deal with before they can make payments. And this issue keeps on coming up. The local business associations have appealed repeatedly to the government to raise the threshold from 1 million shillings to about 10 million shillings, which would be more reasonable. Now, the former President Uhuru did address this issue and he did give CBK instructions and tell them you need to raise this threshold. CBK refused. In August of 2022, a new government came into power. And one of the issues that the new president had to deal with was the issue of this CBK rule. Because local traders had gone to him and told him it is very disruptive. And he too gave CBK directives that they should raise the threshold in order to stop disrupting businesses. CBK said no. In a written statement, the CBK governor said that they hadn't received instructions from Washington to raise the threshold. And for the first time, a sitting governor admitted that CBK is controlled from outside Kenya. In other words, Kenya is not an independent country. CBK will only take the instructions from its foreign masters. And its foreign masters are not here trying to benefit us. They are doing everything within their power to keep us broke and poor. Therefore, CBK does everything within its power to keep us broke and poor. Because this is what keeps its foreign masters happy. Now, I know this sounds very, very exaggerated, but trust me, it is the absolute truth. When you look at this newspaper, when you look at this video, I took a video of this newspaper. We all know that Kenya has run out of cash and many government employees are not getting paid. And in a way, that is poetic justice. It's like karmic retribution because the government employees in Kenya are normally very inefficient and incredibly corrupt. And through their inefficiency and through their corruption, the whole system has gone on its knees. And they're the first ones to get victimized. So in a way, that's a beautiful thing because they screwed up the country. Now the government doesn't have money to pay them. So at least for the first time, they are testing the consequences of their actions personally. Because previously, it was the civilian population that would suffer. But now, the civil servants who are in charge of this basically failed state called Kenya are finally suffering the consequences of their own behavior. So let's look at this newspaper. This has become very common in Kenya. And I took a video of this newspaper just to show people the number of auctions that are happening in Kenya. In fact, the fastest growing business is auction houses. So if you're thinking of going into business, start an auctioneering business because the economy has tanked. Our import binge has finally caught up with us. And without going into too many details about complex economic questions, when you just look at this newspaper, when you look at all these advertisements of auctions, I want you to think that all this property belongs to someone. These are many people who've lost their property. So I keep on thinking, who are these people? What are they doing now? How are they feeling? Is there any plan to take them into therapy? Because losing your property and getting auctioned is a very traumatic thing. Because I want you to think these people have children. And you see, they've lost their house, they've lost their business, they've lost their investment. And it has to be very financially devastating to them because it means that they're essentially bankrupt. So what happens to these people? Is there any kind of safety net that has been set up in place? Of course not. You know, anytime we've had like a terrorist attack in Kenya, the Red Cross and branches of the government normally sends counselors so that the victims of that terrorist attack can get some counseling, some therapy for free. Now, The same trauma and the same devastation is what all these people who've lost this property are going through. So is there any plan by Kenya Red Cross or by the government to at least meet these people and take them through counseling sessions so that they don't delete themselves? Because, you know, self-deletion has become a very big problem in Kenya of late. And you can understand why. Because if you think of yourself, you're like 50 years old, 60 years old, and you've lost everything. How are you supposed to recover? You know you'll never recover. So people go into depression, they go into extreme stress, they get strokes, they get heart attacks, and the situation becomes much, much more worse for their families. But we never think of these auctions, this level of economic devastation, as a terroristic attack, yet it is a terroristic attack. You should read a book called Confessions of an Economic Hitman so that you can understand this is war being waged upon the population. So who is waging this war on Kenyans? Well, there are very many people waging war on Kenyans. So the first group of people who can be blamed for these situations, of course, is Kenyans themselves. It's you people who choose to buy imports rather than manufacture, right? You reject anything that is locally made, right? So there are no factories. And so without factories, the unemployment and poverty is always high, right? Most of you never protested when the government did everything in its power to destroy a local business like Keroche. And it wasn't just Keroche that they were trying to destroy. They went around the country shutting down very many factories. And they were shutting down these factories because these factories were creating competition for foreign-owned businesses in Kenya. So in other words, if you start a manufacturing plant that is directly competing with a foreign-owned brand in Kenya, the government will try to destroy you in order to protect the foreigners. But none of you complained, right? In fact, you were quite pleased that the government was doing everything to shut down domestic factories. So in a way, you are to blame for this economic war that is happening on Kenya right now. Of course, the government has pursued from the 1960s policies that are guaranteed to escalate poverty in the country. The poverty that you see in Kenya is not the result of a mistake, and it's not natural. I know most of you have been brought up in poverty, so you assume that poverty is natural. It's not. Everything in nature has a tendency to multiply. If you have 2 chickens, if you leave them alone, you come back, you'll find you have 100 chickens. If you have 1 mango tree, you come back, it has produced another 500 mango fruit. So in other words, nature is very productive. So poverty is not in the natural order. Poverty only exists in these poor countries because it is an artificial construct set up by the West and then enforced by the local coconut elite, the local, bourgeoisie, right? So this bourgeoisie has been ruling over Kenya from the 1960s, and every policy they follow, it's carefully designed to result in mass poverty. Do you remember the structural adjustment programs? The government pursued those, and it created rampant unemployment and poverty. So we can go back up to the 1960s and you will see every policy that they follow creates poverty. And this is intentional. This is not a mistake. They know what they are doing. And the policy appears to be keep the population poor, because that's the only thing that will keep the West happy. Our elite is pro-West. Now let's talk about CBK in relation to what is happening to very many families in Kenya today. All these people who are losing this property. And this is just one newspaper. I want you to think, for months and months and months, the newspapers have been full of such advertisements of people losing their property. So what is CBK's role in this? If you look at this other newspaper article here, you will see that CBK has been raising the interest rate over the past 1 year. I want you to think of that carefully. Think what they are doing. Think how malicious that policy position is. Every time they raise interest rates, what it means is that the cost of money goes up. So if you had a loan, for example, of 10 million, and your loan repayment was, for example, 80,000 per month, right? And you could manage from your business investment, right? Now CBK comes along and raises the interest rate so that suddenly, instead of you paying back 80k a month, suddenly you have to pay 95,000 a month. And that difference is what costs you your business. That interest, that difference is what costs you the house you just bought. So CBK, when you look at their policy decisions over the last 2 years, they have kept on raising the interest rate. Instead of lowering it in order to make the cost of money cheaper so that people don't lose their property, they are raising it so that people can lose their property and their businesses. That is called economic warfare. It's economic terrorism by the CBK. Why does the CBK do this? What possible justification do they have? The reason is very simple. These are the instructions coming from London and Washington. So it doesn't matter what is good for the people. What matters is to keep the Mzungu happy. And ultimately, this is a problem with a country like Kenya, whereby the decisions are not made for the benefit of the population. They are made strictly to keep the foreign masters happy. And most of you don't seem to understand the role of CBK in your personal problems. And so you don't pay attention to what they're doing. You just think it's just an institution out there that has nothing to do with you. Trust me, CBK are the people pulling money out of your pocket. When you wake up today and you find yourself broke, I promise you it's the CBK. So what they are doing is to create an artificial crisis, which is a very real crisis to so many people. And you heard that they are trying to launch a digital currency. Now that is extremely dangerous. And this economic crisis that they've created and that they are pushing to continue is all part of that digital shilling program, the CBDC. And I've done a whole video about that and the dangers of that and what is the ultimate agenda with that program. So I promise you, these people are not on your side. You keep on ignoring them, thinking that they have nothing to do with you. But never forget, the enemy is always within. The elite that rules the country is not on your side. So, looking at all these poor people who've lost everything, people who have been working hard for a long time. You can imagine trying to raise the money to build, for example, a flat, how expensive that is. And then you lose it all, just like that, because the CBK has decided to raise the interest rate, because that's what London said. And you lose everything. You are returned to standard 1. You lose the house you're sleeping in. Your kids are out of school. Everything is lost, and they auction everything, including your shamba if you had any, including your cars. They finish you off completely. Look at all these people. These are thousands of people. Where are these people? Who are these people who are going through this in a country without any social safety net? So these outcomes are intended outcomes by government, because CBK is part of government, right? This is an intended outcome. They will show you no mercy. You understand? When they make these decisions, you are just called human collateral damage, because the most important thing is to keep the Mzungu happy. If London has decreed that interest rates go up, it doesn't matter what you're going through. The interest rate will go up and you lose your house. That's why I always tell you, this is not our country. We are still under colonialism. Most of you don't believe it, but many of you are going through it right now. The decision-making centers where the real decisions are made about this country is Washington and London. And don't you ever forget it. So when I tell you that CBK is keeping us broke, it is not propaganda and it is no exaggeration. It's the actual truth.